Hi, I'm Ralph Preston, and welcome to another Roadmap. I'm here with William Lowe, as usual. But tonight we're going to talk about dealing with AFOs. Uh, so, to start off, William's going to tell us a little bit about some of the positive things that AFOs can do for a stroke survivor post stroke. So, William?
Yeah, sure. I guess I'll start us off. So, for everyone watching, I just wanted to talk really quickly about AFOs and I guess the benefit which they can provide for you in your recovery. So, in the in recovery after stroke, there's a lot of talk about AFOs, and there is a reason why physical therapists actually hand them out and prescribe them to stroke survivors. The reason why physical therapists prescribe and recommend AFOs to stroke survivors is because quite often stroke survivors who are going through their recovery, they get to a place where they're not able to dorsiflex their ankle, or in other words, be able to lift up their ankle high enough in order to clear the ground whenever they're walking. And this obviously leads to problems such as tripping over your affected leg whenever you're walking, or your affected leg actually lagging behind your non-affected leg whenever you're trying to switch from one leg to the other whenever you're walking. Now, whenever stroke survivors get prescribed an AFO, it's great because it can actually force the foot into an angle where it's upright, so it allows a stroke survivor to clear the ground with their foot and actually be able to walk safely without obviously that risk of tripping over their affected leg. But however good this benefit is, it comes with some things which are not so beneficial for a stroke survivor's recovery in the long term. And in this case, it's getting into a situation where your brain is conditioned to and rely on the AFO so much so that it doesn't learn how to actually send those signals by itself in order to actually lift up the ankle. And also because your foot is actually placed in a static position because of the AFO, your brain your brain loses some strength and the ability to actually push down the ankle in order to push off the affected leg whenever you're walking so that you can actually propel yourself forward. So in a sense, AFOs, they're actually quite beneficial from a safety standpoint. If you're a stroke survivor who is in the stage of recovery where walking is quite unsafe for you and there is a risk of yourself tripping or tripping whenever you walk, and AFO is great. But thinking long term, AFOs, I mean, unless you're a fan of using an AFO for the rest of your life to help you walk, there is a detrimental side to them in that they can actually not allow your brain to learn what is necessary and what's required in order for you to actually teach yourself how to walk independently in your recovery after stroke without using an AFO to actually assist you to get there. So that's basically why physical therapists prescribe AFOs in the first place. Um, and as you can see, they do provide a really good benefit initially, but in the long term, if you're not careful, it might actually stop the brain from learning what it needs to learn in order to help you get to a place where you can walk independently and without an external aid. So I know earlier we were having a chat about AFOs, Ralph, and you were sharing some of the things you discovered helping other stroke survivors with AFOs. I was just wondering if you want to share your thoughts on on AFOs and your experience.
Sure. First of all, there's one other reason why they might give you an AFO. And to me, this is an opinion, my opinion. It's the only reason to keep one, and that is ankle roll or supination. Some stroke survivors have bad ankle roll and, in a sense, walk on the outside of their foot to the point that They need something to straighten it back out closer to neutral, like it was, um, because you can actually break your ankle if you twist it hard enough and walk on the side of it. Um, so, share my personal experience. Well, first, I'll share my personal experience, and I'll say a couple of things that are also, I suppose, opinion. And that is to seem to give them to everybody. It's like a one size fits all. Oh, you had a stroke, here is an AFO. Of course, the people that want an AFO and didn't get one are now saying, well, I didn't get one. Anyway, I don't particularly think I needed one, but they gave me one anyway. And I was in the rehab hospital about 3 weeks. It took at least 10 days or 2 weeks from the time they fitted me and ordered it and it came in. So I wore it about 4 or 5, maybe a week, 4 or 5 days, maybe a week. When I got home, I thought, well, it was uncomfortable. It bothered me from the beginning. It didn't fit in my shoes very well. It's a hard plate. It held my toe up, I guess, so I wouldn't trip over my toe or drag my toe. And I made a decision to be mindful of my ankle roll. I had minor ankle roll or supination, and to not use the AFOs. So I never wore it again. Let's see, a couple other things. It seems to me that the way our healthcare system is set up, at least here in the States, that the insurance schedule, the AFO schedule and the insurance schedule don't jive. It seems like a lot of people end up on AFOs with a physical therapist and they run out of insurance before they get off those AFOs, and then they don't know how to get off of them. I don't know why, things like, we talked about this, like wheelchairs and AFOs, they don't give you directives as to how much you should use them and when you should use them, like they do, say, with a hand splint. A lot of times the hand splint, and OT will tell you when to wear it, how much to wear it, work towards wearing it at night. Anyway, AFOs and wheelchairs and some other things don't seem to come with guidance like that. And I see people in the stroke groups who are, say, I'm 10, 12 years out and I'm still wearing my AFO. That's just shocking to me, unless, there are some people, I suppose, that are, just maybe need a piece of plastic on their leg for the rest of their life. But I think there are too many that have a piece of plastic on their leg for way too long because they don't really know. They aren't given any guidance. They run out of insurance before they can get off of it, and they're lost. And once you start walking with one, like you mentioned, William, certain muscles like the dorsiflexion, plantarflexion in your ankle, your brain can't practice them when you're locked in. It's kind of it's a big catch-22 or double-edged sword or whatever analogy you want to use, AFOs, because while you're wearing one, you can't really do a lot of the things that you need to do to build up the muscles that you need to build up in order to not need an AFO. So that's my personal experience and some observations. Well, what else do you think about AFOs, William?
Yeah, definitely. So I just want to reiterate. Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with everything you said. There is no one size for all the folks who are watching this. There is no one size fits all approach and treatment to recovery after stroke. I personally believe that AFOs are great when you do them right. And the reason why I say this is because an AFO is helping your brain to practice something which it typically wouldn't be able to without the AFO. So, for example, if you're in a situation where you're a stroke swallower and it's unsafe for you to walk because there's a risk of yourself tripping over with your affected leg, with the AFO, you can potentially get in more practice and more repetitions of you walking without that risk happening. But that being said, even though you can get a lot of practice in, it doesn't mean that it's great practice, because during these times when you're practicing with the AFO on, it's a good idea to recognize that the AFO is helping you to actually do something which you previously couldn't. And although it is helping you to do that, at the end of the day, the AFO is doing most of the work, because it's locking your foot and your ankle into a static position where it allows you to clear the ground. And at the end of the day, even though you do improve, your brain will reach a point where it will be conditioned to do things a certain way. And especially with the AFO, where your brain doesn't have incentive to actually send those signals to turn on those muscles, which it typically would have to, it's not going to have that opportunity if you're using the AFO all the time. So I think that when it comes to using things like AFOs in your recovery, like Ralph said, there should be some sort of directive, or there should be some I think when you're using an AFO in your recovery after stroke, it's a good thing to give yourself certain times of the day when you're using the AFO to help yourself walk, and maybe other times of the day you always revisit and do exercises outside of the AFO without the AFO to actually give your brain some time to educate itself on how to actually send those signals to turn on the muscles which are required to help you improve your walking after stroke. So, for example, if your goal is to walk maybe 50 yards or 60 yards, and let's say you can do 30 yards and you get tired around the 40-yard mark, then maybe at the 40-yard mark, you could put on the AFO to help you get towards 60 yards and finish that stretch quite well. So and by doing that, what you're doing is you're allowing your brain to actually get that extra practice in, which you typically wouldn't be able to do without the AFO. I think that AFOs, in a sense, they're given to teach your brain how to walk, not allow you to rely on them to actually walk in your recovery after stroke. But rather, I think some of the things we've talked about, Ralph and myself, is that recovery happens when you practice what your brain has already learned. And recovery cannot happen when you rely on something else to help you get to your destination. I think in a sense, there always has to be time in your recovery after stroke where you have to actually teach your brain how to send those signals to turn on the muscles, which are required for walking, so that you won't need AFOs to actually help you walk. AFOs are great because they can get you started, but there needs to be time in your recovery or in your exercise program where you're educating your brain on how to send those signals to turn on the muscles to teach your brain how to actually walk without the AFO, so that eventually you can get to a place where you don't need the AFO to help you walk, and it will be your choice whether or not you want to use the AFO. Whenever you're walking, let's say if you're reaching that 40-yard stretch and you're just too tired to walk that extra 20 yards to walk 60 yards, as I stated earlier. So those are basically my thoughts around AFOs. I believe that if you are going to maximize the benefit which an AFO would give you, that rather than relying on it as a crutch to help you walk, that there should be rules put in place when you're using the AFO. So you would only use it when you get fatigued, when you're out walking. But then other times when you're at home, you should be using some time to teach your brain how to actually isolate muscles which are required for walking, such as your glutes, so that you can actually teach your brain some of the signals that it needs to send in order to help itself walk without the use of the AFO. Because at the end of the day, an AFO is just an aid. It's not, I don't think it's supposed to, well, this is just personal opinion. I think that to get the maximum benefit out of an AFO, that you don't rely on it. You just use it to teach your brain what it needs in order to help you improve your walking after stroke. And the rest is up to you to continue to build off that improvement and continue to educate your brain on how to strengthen up those signals and send those signals from your brain to allow your brain to walk and get to a place in your recovery where it's doing what it's doing when you're on the AFO, but without using the AFO to help you walk the way that you would typically walk with the AFO.
Couple of things. I made a decision for myself. If I was unable to walk without the AFO, I would have worn the AFO and walked. So I don't want anybody to think I just decided I was against the AFO. The other thing is a lot of people accept a lot more than I was willing to accept. For example, I started working on walking the day after I got home from the rehab hospital, and it took a couple weeks to get into outpatient PT. In that time, I'd not worn the AFO, and I'd started to do ankle exercises, and I was, building up the number of laps that I could walk safely without the AFO. So it was part of a plan. I'm not like categorically against them, and I was against it for me. So then there are a few things that you can do, even if you're in a wheelchair or you have no guidance. So let's talk about that. So if I needed that AFO to walk, as soon as I got into PT, I would have been asking them, what do I need to do to get rid of this AFO? Same way I took my DSLR camera to occupational therapy, and I said I need to be able to zoom and focus with this left hand on the lens. I showed them what I needed to do, and they gave me appropriate exercises, and wasn't that long before I was able to do it. So you and I, William, we talk a lot about having a plan at home and having a plan for when your insurance runs out. If you have an AFO, I would be working on a plan from the get-go how do you get rid of it? If you wait until you find out that you only have 3 more visits or something, you're already kind of behind the 8 ball, because I can tell you it's going to take more than a couple of weeks to build up your ankle muscles. I know from my own personal experience. I also know from helping a couple of people get off of AFOs. One thing you can do is just sitting in your wheelchair without the AFO. You can put your legs out. That'll put your feet up. That now you can point out. If you put your feet like right under you, like square, like you're going to stand up, you can't plantarflex because the ground's there. But if you extend your feet out and put them on the heels, you can plantarflex and dorsiflex sitting in a wheelchair. There's also some other strategies that people engage in to try and build up their ankle strength and get off the AFO. A lot of stroke recovery, William, you and I know this, it's practice. So one of the things a lot of people have done is, well, if you ever had a piece of plastic on your leg, they're uncomfortable after a while. So, when you take them off and you're giving yourself a break, people often walk around their house without the AFO, barefoot. Barefoot seems to work well. I've heard a few people walking in the grass barefoot to try and get rid of an AFO. The problem with the grass is you can end up with clumps. If you have any kind of ankle roll, you got to be real careful you don't step on a clump and then play into your ankle roll. It's dangerous. You could break your ankle. So familiar environment is one thing. And if you have an aide or somebody, one of the people I helped has somebody that comes in and helps them walk, and they switched to no AFO, and now they're working on no cane. So it's like most things in stroke recovery. You shouldn't get stuck with it. It should be a tool that you can use in your progression, and you should have a plan as to how you use it the best and how to get and how to get off of it. And I guess I'm advocating that since they're complicated and takes a while, and insurance doesn't last forever, that personally, if I would have brought up the AFO on visit 1 or visit 2, they usually do an evaluation. Maybe you wouldn't interrupt them doing that, but certainly on the second visit, I'd be talking about what's the plan to get rid of this thing. So, you have anything else, William?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to highlight what you said about doing those ankle exercises with the AFO. So like I mentioned earlier, the AFO, it forces your foot into a static position in order to allow your foot to actually clear the ground so you can walk safely without tripping over your affected leg. I think what Ralph mentioned about strengthening up your ankle, that was a really good point. One thing I want to add to that is as you're sitting down and you're practicing plantarflexing your ankle, one thing you could do to actually give your brain a little bit of an extra feedback and allow it to actually connect the dots a lot quicker is to get a piece of theraband or a belt which you can actually loop around your foot or your ankle, and you can use that as a target to try and send a signal from your brain to try and push the belt down or push the theraband back, and that can give your brain a sense of how much strength you're developing in that ankle, because obviously you're actually being able to see the belt bounce back as you're pushing it back at the same time. That can reward your brain with the progress that you're currently making, and it's also a good strengthening tool which you can do in front of the television when you're not wearing the AFO, because like I mentioned earlier, when you have an AFO, some of the muscles around your ankle, they get weakened. And it's very important to preserve the strength of these, especially if you want to get to a place where you're walking without the AFO.
Yep. Um, well, um, I've been putting videos in the description. I've got a playlist on ankles. Sitting in a wheelchair, there are other things you can do where you don't have to stand up or anything. For example, I'm seated and I'm doing leg lifts now. So leg lifts and toe lifts, one of the things that I've done, or I did, and I've done with other people, is sometimes use a theraband to get them started when they can't pull up at all. You can pull up a little bit with a band and then use mental imagery or mental practice to get it going, and then do what you're saying, use the band as a resistance to keep challenging your brain to learn. But there are a lot of things that you can do, like you mentioned, sitting around in front of the TV. I got my toes moving again doing that. That's in that ankle playlist. So I'll put the some of the ankle exercises that you can do to build up the ankle. And the way I helped a couple people get off of AFOs is to have them do weight bearing, to teach them what neutral is when that foot's straight up and down. It's not rolled to the outside. There's no supination. Some people can't do it. If your ankle's more than a couple degrees out of whack, you're going to have a hard time getting it back to neutral. I don't know what the techniques are for bad ankle roll, other than I know that some people get surgery. But I know that if you're, because somebody I helped was 2 degrees out, PT was a little skeptical. Then they measured her at 1 degree after she engaged in similar activities to what we're talking about. I wouldn't be surprised if she's back to 0 degrees to neutral. But if you're going to do this and you have any ankle roll, the most important thing is to learn where that neutral point is, where your foot is flat on the ground and straight up, no ankle roll, no supination, nothing not too much to the inside. That's pronation. So I'll put those exercises in, and William, anything else before we close it out?
No, not really. I mean, if there's one thing you can take away from myself and Ralph having a discussion today, is that an AFO is really, an AFO, the best way to use an AFO in your recovery is to use it as a tool to help you move towards your recovery goals. And it's always important, obviously, to make that time to strengthen up the muscles, which might not have the opportunity to actually fire when you're using the AFO, so that those muscles don't potentially get weakened as your brain gets conditioned to using the AFO a lot more. Now, having those rules in place when you use the AFO and when you don't use the AFO, obviously when you're not using the AFO, to be working on those other components, or those other muscles which might be crucial to helping you return to walking more independently. Myself and Ralph, we've provided some exercise examples here today, which you can do. I think all of them will be extremely relevant if you're a stroke survivor who find yourself in a situation where you're wearing the AFO and you're looking for other ways to help improve your walking when you're not wearing the AFO, obviously.
And my final word would be, don't wear it so much that you end up getting locked into it. I mean, I see a lot of stroke survivors in the groups that say, I can't walk without it. I see people saying they're 10 and 12 years out. I'm sure there are some people that may never walk without one, but I think that there are an awful lot of people that get locked into them, and the lack of exercising those muscles tends to make that happen. Like we talked about, it's a catch-22. So don't get to where you can't walk without the thing, would be my advice. So thank you, William, and thanks for everybody for tuning in and listening, and we'll see everyone next time on the next roadmap.
Great. Thanks, Ralph.